आइए पढ़ें अम्बेडकर को। आज इस कड़ी में हम पढ़ने जा रहे हैं पूना पैक्ट, जो कि एक बहुत ज़रूरी और सिग्निफिकेंट डॉक्यूमेंट है। और हम ये जाने कि पूना पैक्ट क्या था, और इस कड़ी में हम पढ़ेंगे सिर्फ वही चीज़ें जो बाबा साहब ने अम्बेडकर ने खुद लिखी है। 24 सितंबर 1932 को येरावाड़ा जेल में, महाराष्ट्र की। अब हम पढ़ते हैं इसमें पहला जो इसमें बाबा साहब ने लिखा है, पूना पैक्ट, Gandhi and his fast, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. The communal question was the rock on which the Indian Roundtable Conference suffered a shipwreck. The conference broke up as there could be no agreement between the majority and minority communities. The minority in India insisted that their position under Swaraj should be safeguarded by allowing them special representation in the legislatures. Mr. Gandhi, as representative of the Congress, was not prepared to recognize such a claim except in the case of Muslims and the Sikh. Even in the case of Muslims and Sikh, no agreement was reached either on the question of number of seats or the nature of electorates. There was a complete deadlock as there was no possibility of an agreement. The hope lay in arbitration. On this everybody was agreed except myself, as it was left to Mr. Ramsay MacDonald, the Prime Minister, to decide upon the issue. When at the first roundtable conference the Indian delegates did not agree upon a solution of the communal question, followers of Mr. Gandhi said that nothing better could be accepted from them. It was said that they were unrepresentative and responsible to nobody and were deliberately creating disunity by playing into the hands of British fools and nominees they were. The world was told to await the arrival of Mr. Gandhi, whose statesmanship it was promised would be quite adequate to settle the dispute. It was therefore a matter of great humiliation for the friends of Mr. Gandhi that he should have acknowledged his bankruptcy and joined in the request to Prime Minister to arbitrate. But if the conference failed, the fault is entirely of Mr. Gandhi. A more ignorant and more tactless representative could not have been sent to a conference which was convened to forge a constitution which was to reconcile the diverse interests of India. Mr. Gandhi was thoroughly ignorant of constitutional law or finance. He does not believe in intellectual equipment. Indeed, he has a supreme contempt for it, and his contribution to the solution of the many difficulties is therefore nil. He was tactless because he annoyed almost all the delegates by constantly telling them that they were non-entities and he was the only man who counted and who could deliver the goods. At the first roundtable conference, the delegates did not agree upon the solution of the communal problem, but it is equally true that they were very near agreeing to it, and they departed. They had not given up hope of agreeing, but at the end of the second roundtable conference, so much bad blood was created by Mr. Gandhi that there was no chance of reconciliation left, and there was no way except arbitration. The Prime Minister's decision on the communal question was announced on 17 August 1932. The term of the decision in so far as they related to the untouchables were as follows. Communal decision by His Majesty's Government 1932. And I quote, in the statements made by the Prime Minister on 1st December last on behalf of His Majesty's Government at the close of the second session of the Roundtable Conference, which was immediately afterwards endorsed by both houses of Parliament, it was made plain that if the communities in India were unable to reach a settlement acceptable to all parties on the communal question, which the conference had failed to solve, His Majesty's government were determined that the Indian constitutional advance should not on that account be frustrated, and they would remove this obstacle by devising and applying themselves a provisional scheme. Second, on the 19th March last, His Majesty's government, having been informed that the continued failure of the communities to reach agreement was blocking the progress of the plans of the framing of a new constitution, stated that they were engaged upon a careful re-examination of the difficult and controversial question which arise. They are now satisfied that without a decision at least some aspect of the problems connected with the position of minority under the new constitution, no further progress can be made with the framing of the constitution. His Majesty's government have accordingly decided that they will include provisions to give effect to the scheme set out below in the proposals relating to the Indian constitution to be laid in due course before Parliament. The scope of a scheme is purposely confined to the arrangement to be made for the representation of the British Indian communities in the provincial legislatures. Consideration of representation in the legislature at the centre being deferred for the reason given in paragraph 20 below. The decision to limit the scope of the scheme implies no failure to realize that the framing of the constitution will necessitate the decision of a number of other problems of great importance to minorities, but has been taken in the hope of that once a pronouncement has been made upon the basic question of method and proportions of representation, the communities themselves may find it possible to arrive at modus vivendi on other communal problems which have not received the examination they require. Point 4. His Majesty's government wish it to be the most clearly understood that they themselves can be no parties to any negotiations which may be initiated with the view to the revision of their decision, and will not be prepared to give consideration to any representation aimed at securing the modification of it which is too supported by all the parties affected, but they are most desirous to close no door to an agreed settlement should reach such happily be forthcoming. If therefore before a new Government of India Act has passed into law, they are satisfied that the communities who are concerned are mutually agreed upon a practicable alternative scheme, either in respect of any one or more of the governance province or in respect of the whole of the British India, they will be prepared to recommend a Parliament that alternative should be substituted for provisions now outlined. There are point 5, 6, 7, 8, and then I am coming to the 9. Member of the depressed classes qualified to vote will vote in a general constituency in view of the fact that for the considerable period these classes would be unlikely by this means alone to secure any adequate representation in the legislature. A number of special seats will be assigned to them as shown in the table. These seats will be filled by election from the special constituencies in which only members of the depressed classes electorally qualified will be entitled to vote. Any person voting in such a special constituency will, as stated above, be also entitled to vote in a general constituency. It is intended that these constituencies should be formed in selected areas where the depressed classes are most numerous, and that except in Madras they should not cover the whole area of the province. In Bengal, it seems possible that in some general constituencies a majority of the voters will belong to the depressed classes. Accordingly, pending further investigations, no number has been fixed for the member to be written for the special depressed class constituencies in that province. It is intended to secure that the depressed classes should obtain not less than 10 seats in the Bengal legislature. The precise definition in each province of those who, if electorally qualified, will be entitled to vote in the special depressed class constituencies has not yet been finally determined. It will be based as a rule on the general principle advocated in the Franchise Committee's report. Modification may, however, be found necessary in some provinces in northern India where the applications of the general criteria of untouchability might result in the definition unsuitable in some respect to the special condition of the province. His Majesty Government do not consider that these special depressed classes constituencies will be required for more than limited time. They intend that the constitutions shall provide that they shall come to an end after 20 years if they have not previously been abolished under the general power of electorate revision referred to in paragraph 6. So far as the other minority communities were concerned, the communal award has accepted and the sore of disunity and discord was closed. But so far as the untouchables were concerned, it remained open. Mr. Gandhi would not allow it to be healed. On his return in India from Round Table Conference, Mr. Gandhi was put behind the bars by the British government. But though in Yerawada goal, Mr. Gandhi had not forgotten that he had to prevent the untouchables from getting their claim to special representation recognized by the British government. He feared that the British government might grant them this right, notwithstanding the threat he had held out while at the Round Table Conference to resist it with his own life. Consequently, he took the earliest opportunity to be in communication with the very British government which had incarnated him. On the 11th March 1932, Mr. Gandhi arrested the following letter to Sir Samuel Hoare and then Secretary of the State of India. Dear Sir Samuel, you will perhaps recall that at the end of my speech at the Round Table Conference, when the minorities' claim was presented, I had said that I should resist with my life the grant of separate electorates to the depressed classes. This was not said in the heat of the moment nor by way of rhetoric. It was meant to be a serious statement. In pursuance of that statement, I had hoped on my return to India to mobilize public opinion against separate electorate at any rate for the depressed classes, but it was not to be. From the newspapers I am permitted to read, I observe that any moment His Majesty Government may declare that their decision. At first I had thought if the decisions was found to create separate as I might then consider necessary to give effect to my vow, but I feel it would be unfair to British government for me to act without giving previous notice. Naturally they could not attach the significance I give to my statement. Separate electorates harmful. I need hardly retreat all the objections I have to the creation of separate electorate for the depressed classes. I feel as if I was one of them. Their case stand on the wholly different footing from that of the others. I am not against their representation in the legislatures. I should favor everyone for their adults, male and female, being registered as voters irrespective of education or property qualification. Even though the franchisees that may be stricter for other, but I hold that separate electorate is harmful for them and for Hindus. Whatever it may be from the purely political standpoint, to appreciate the harm of that separate electorate would do them, one has to know how they are distributed among so-called caste Hindus and how dependent they are on the latter. So far as Hinduism is concerned, separate electorate would simply vivisect and disrupt it. For me, the question of these classes is predominantly moral and religious. The political support important through it is dwindles into significance compared to the moral and religious issues. You will have to appreciate my feeling in this matter by remembering that I have been interested in the condition of these classes from my boyhood and have more than once staked my all for their sake. I say this not to pride myself in any way, for I feel that no penance that the Hindus may do can in any way compensate for the calculated degradation to which they have consigned the depressed classes for centuries. Shall fast unto that. But I know that separate electorate is neither a penance nor any remedy for the crushing degradation they have grounded under. I therefore respectfully inform His Majesty Government that in the event of their decision creating separate electorate for the depressed classes, I must fast unto death. I am painfully conscious of the fact that such a step, whilst I am a prisoner, must cause grave embarrassment to His Majesty's Government, and that I will be regarded by many as highly improper on the part of on holding my position to introduce into the political field methods which they would describe as hysterical, if not much worse. All I can urge in defense is that for me, the contemplated step is not a method, it is a part of my being. It is the call of conscience which I dare not disobey, even though it may cost whatever reputation for sanity I may possess. So far as I can see now, my discharge from imprisonment will not make the duty of fasting any these less imperative. I am hoping, however, all my fears are wholly unjustified and the British government have no intention whatever for creating separate electorate for depressed classes. The following reply was sent to Mr. Gandhi by Secretary of State. Dear Mr. Gandhi, India Office, Whitehall, April 13, 1932. And this is Dear Mr. Gandhi. This is written, Dear Mr. Gandhi. This letter has come from in India Office, Whitehall, April 13, 1932. I write this in answer to your letter of 11th March, and I say at once I realize fully the strength of your feeling upon the question of separate electorates for the depressed classes. I can only say that we intend to give any decision that may be necessary solely and only upon the merits of the case. As you are aware, Lord Lothian's committee has not yet completed its tour, and it must be some week before we can receive any conclusion at which it may have arrived. When we receive that report, we shall have to give most careful consideration to its recommendations, and we shall not give a decision until we have taken into account, in addition to the new expressed by the committee, the views that you and those who think with you have so forcibly expressed. I feel sure if you were in our position, you would be taking exactly the same action we intend to take. You would await the committee's report. You would then give it to your fullest consideration, and before arriving at the final decision, you would take into account the views that have been expressed on both sides of the controversies. More than this I cannot say. Indeed, I do not imagine you would expect me to say more. After giving this warning, Mr. Gandhi slept over the matter, thinking that a repetition of this threat to fast unto that was sufficient to paralyze the British government and prevent them from accepting the claim of the untouchables for special representation. When on 17 August 1932 the terms of the communal award were announced, Mr. Gandhi found that his threat had failed to have any effect. He first tried to get the terms of the communal award revised. Accordingly, he addressed the following letter to the Prime Minister, and this is from the Yerawada Central Prison, August 18, 1932. Dear friend, there can be no doubt that Sir Samuel Hoare has assured you and the Cabinet my letter to him on 11th March on the question of the representation of depressed classes. That letter should be treated as part of this letter can be read together with this decision to fast. I have read the British government's decision on the representation of minorities and I have slept over it. In pursuance of my letter to Sir Samuel Hoare and my declaration at the meeting of the Minorities Committee of the Round Table Conference on 13 November 1931 at St. James Palace, I have to resist your decision with my life. The only way I can do so is by declaring a perpetual fast unto death from fast of any kind save water with or without salt and soda. This fast will cease if during its progress the British government of its own motion or under pressure of public opinion revise their decision and withdraw their scheme of communal electorates for the depressed classes, whose representatives should be elected by the general electorate under the common franchisee, no matter how wide it is. The proposed fast will come into operation in the ordinary course from the noon of 20th September next, unless the said decision is meanwhile revised in the manner suggested above. I am asking the authorities here to cable the text of this letter to you so as to give you ample notice. But in any case, I am leaving sufficient time for this letter to reach you in time by the slowest route. I also ask that this letter and my letter to Samuel Hore, already referred to, be published at the earliest possible moment. On my part, I have scrupulously observed the rule of jail and have communicated my desire or the contents of 2 letters to no one save my 2 companies, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel and Mr. Mahadev Desai. But I want, if you make it possible, public opinion to be affected by my letter. Hence, my request for their early publication, not to compass release. I regret the decision I have taken, but as a man of a religion, and I hold myself to be, I have no other course left open to me. As I have said in my letter to Sir Samuel Hore, even if His Majesty's government decision to release me in order to save themselves as from embarrassment, my fast will have to continue, for I cannot now hope to resist the decision by any other means, and I have no desire whatever to compass my release by any means other than honorable. It may be that my judgment is wrong, and that I am wholly in error in regarding separate electorates for the depressed classes as harmful to them or to Hinduism. If so, I am not likely to be in the right with a reference to other part of my philosophy for life. In that case, my death by fasting will be at once a penance for any error and a lifting of a weight from of these numberless men and a woman who have childlike faith in my wisdom. Whereas if my judgment is right, thus I have little doubt it is, the contemplated step is but due to the fulfillment of the scheme of life which I have tried for more than a quarter of the century, apparently not without considerable success. I remain your faithful friend, Mr. M.K. Gandhi. The Prime Minister replies as under: 10th Downing Street, September 8, 1932. Dear Mr. Gandhi, I have received your letter with much surprise, and let me add, with your sincere regret. Moreover, I cannot help thinking that you have written it under a misunderstanding as to what the decision of His Majesty's government as regarded the depressed classes really implies. We have always understood you were irrevocably opposed to the permanent segregation of the depressed classes from the Hindu community. You made your position very clear on the Minorities Committee of the Round Table Conference, and you expressed it again in the letter you wrote to Sir Samuel Hore in 11th March. We also knew your views were shared by the great body of Hindu opinion, and we therefore took it into most careful account when we were considering the question of representation of the depressed classes. Government decision explained. Whilst in view of the numerous appeals we have received from depressed classes organizations and the General Committee social disabilities under which they labor and which you have often recognized, we felt it our duty to safeguard what we believe to be the right of the depressed classes to fair proportion of the representation in the legislature. We were equally careful to do nothing that would split off their community from the Hindu world. Nothing. You yourself state in your letter of March 11 that you were not against their representation in the legislation. Under the government scheme, the depressed classes will remain part of the Hindu community and will vote with the Hindu electorate on an equal footing. But for the first 20 years, while still remaining electorally part of the Hindu community, they will receive through a limited number of the special constituencies means of safeguarding the rights and interests that we are convinced is necessary under present condition. Where these constituencies are created, a member of the depressed classes will not be deprived of their votes in the general Hindu constituencies, but will have two votes in order that their membership of the Hindu community should remain unimpaired. We have deliberately decided against the creation of what you described as a communal electorate for the depressed classes and included all depressed classes voters in the general and Hindu constituencies so that the higher caste candidate should have to solicit their votes or depressed classes candidates should have to solicit the vote of the higher caste at elections. Thus in every way was unity of Hindu society preserved, safeguard temporary. We felt, however, that during the early period of the responsible government, when power of the provinces would pass to whoever possessed a majority in the legislature, it was essential that the depressed classes, from you have yourself described in your letter to Sir Samuel Hore as having consigned by caste Hindus to calculated degradation of centuries, should return a certain number of members of their own choosing to legislature of 7 of the 9 provinces to which to voice their grievances and their ideals and prevent decisions going against them without the legislature and the government listening to their case. In a word, to place them in a position to speak themselves, which every fair-minded person electing special representatives by reservation of the seats in existing condition under any system of the franchises which is practicable, members who could genuinely represent them and be responsible for them because of the practically all cases, such members should be elected by the majority of consisting of high caste Hindus. The special advantage initially given under our scheme to the depressed classes by means of the limited number of the special constituencies in addition to their normal electoral rights in the general Hindu constituencies is wholly different in conception and affect the methods of representation adopted for majorities such as Muslims by means of separate communal electorates. For example, a Muslim cannot vote or be a candidate in a general constituency, whereas any electorally qualified member of the depressed classes can vote and stand in the general constituency. Reservation minimum. The number of territorial seats allotted to the Muslim is naturally conditioned by the fact that it is impossible for them to gain any further territorial seats in most provinces they enjoy a weightage in excess of their population ratio. The number of special seats to be filled from special depressed classes constituencies will be seen to be small and has been fixed not to provide a quota numerically appropriate for the total representation of the whole of the depressed class population, but solely to secure minimum number of spokespersons of the depressed classes. As I understand your attitude, you propose to adopt the extreme course of starving yourself to death not in order to secure that the depressed class should have joined electorates with other Hindus, because that is already provided, nor to maintain the unity of Hindus, which is also provided, but solely to prevent the depressed classes who admittedly suffered from terrible disabilities today from being able to secure a limited number of representatives of their own choosing to speak on their behalf in legislatures which will have a dominating influence over their future. In the light of these very fair and cautious proposals, I am quite unable to understand the reason for the decision you have taken and can only think you have made it under a misapprehension of the actual facts. Government decision stand. In response to a very general request from Indians after they have failed to produce a settlement themselves, the government, much against this will, undertook to give a decision on the minorities question. They have now given it and they cannot be expected to alter it except on the condition they have stated. I am afraid therefore that my answer to you must be that the government decision stands and that only agreement of the communities themselves can constitute other electoral arrangements for those that government have devised in a sincere endeavor to weigh the conflicting claim on their just merits. You ask that this correspondence, including your letter to Sir Samuel Hore of March 11, should be published, as it would seem to me unfair if your present internment were to deprive you of the opportunity of explaining to the public the reason why you intend to fast. I really access to the request. If on reconsideration you repeat it, let me, however, once again urge you to consider the actual detail of government's decision and ask yourself seriously the question whether it really justify you in taking the action you contemplate. I am your very sincerely, J. Ramsey McDonald.